Welcome to you all to our second webinar in our series on the theme Accelerating Progress Towards the Sustainable Development Goals in the Post-COVID Era, the Contribution of Universities. It is great to have so many attending once again, both students and staff and friends from a very wide range of countries. I am delighted today that our webinar will be led by the University of Waterloo in Canada. Waterloo is an outstanding university, one, as you will be aware, with a global reputation for excellence in a very wide range of areas, and one of Strathclyde's principal strategic international partners. Over the past few years, the collaboration between our two universities has become much closer, with colleagues in discussion and working with each other in many areas of academic life. Indeed, in the past year, the President of Waterloo and the Principal of Strathclyde together convened both a roundtable and a colloquium with colleagues from our two universities to explore greater joint engagement and to promote further understanding of each other's academic expertise over a range of subject areas. So let me introduce Professor Ian Rowlands, who leads the Waterloo team today in presenting on their theme, University Partnerships to Advance the SDGs, Local, National and International Examples. And I look forward to hearing of all the outstanding work that Waterloo are leading and inspiring in collaboration with partners from across civil society and different levels of government in Canada and in different national and global networks. Ian is the Associate Vice President International at the University of Waterloo, working alongside the President in taking forward the development of global partnerships. And he is also a professor in the School of Environment, Resources and Sustainability, the perfect combination of skills and insights to lead us today. He has for several years been a great friend of Strathclyde, and we are delighted to have him lead this webinar. He will be supported by several colleagues, as I know he wishes to cover a lot of ground with us today. And I will leave Ian to introduce them in a far more informative manner than they are, of course, most welcome today. Ian, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Ian Rowlands, and I'm the Associate Vice President International at the University of Waterloo, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you as well to our valued partners and good friends at the University of Strathclyde for the invitation to participate in their webinar series. My Waterloo colleagues and I are delighted to be speaking on university partnerships to advance the SDGs, local, national, and international examples. Could I have the next slide, please? I begin by inviting you to reflect as we honor the land and the Indigenous heritage of the place on which all Waterloo speakers are located today. The University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building. Next slide, please. Today, my colleagues and I will be offering some perspectives and experiences around the ways in which universities, partnering with different parts of society at different scales, can advance the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And before we turn our focus to those partnerships for the SDGs, please let me introduce very briefly the University of Waterloo. A comprehensive university located in Southern Ontario in Canada, Waterloo's more than 45,000 members have much of their academic work organized across 6 faculties: arts, engineering, environment, health, mathematics, and science. Next slide, please. To give you a sense of Waterloo activity broadly, parts of which our speakers today will dive into more deeply, let me say a few words about each of these 4 areas. Next, please. In terms of our academic strength, we're proud of the abilities and achievements of all of our members, with individuals in our professoriate, for example, occupying key chairs of national prominence and significance. And we hold a special place of pride for Professor Donna Strickland in our Faculty of Science, Nobel Laureate in Physics 2018. Next slide, please. Experiential education is at the foundation of our academic offerings. 3/4 of our undergraduate programs, our undergraduate students are enrolled in cooperative education programs, during which they alternate between 4-month academic study and 4-month paid work terms. Interactions between the workplace and the campus are mutually reinforcing. Next, please. Being a member of Canada's U15 group of research-intensive universities, Waterloo engages with public sector, private sector, and civil society partners in pure, applied, and other forms of research. Our creator-owned intellectual property rights policy catalyzes commercialization activities and, next please, contributes to a strong startup culture at Waterloo. We support entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship activities through academic, co-curricular, and other means. Indeed, we're located in a region known nationally and internationally for its innovation. Next, please. And now turning to our particular focus today, the University of Waterloo has connections to SDGs across teaching and research areas, within its operational practice, and through its engagement activities. Like our partners in this webinar series, and no doubt like many of you viewing today as well, we have strategic plans that are accompanied by regular reporting. Next, please. And indeed, partnerships, the focus of today's webinar, are critical to the execution of those plans. To advance sustainability, we engage with many others across different scales, from the local to the global. And we're delighted that we get to share some of that experience with all of you today. Next, please. Of course, SDG 17 specifically highlights the importance of the global partnership for sustainable development. And indeed, across all of the SDGs, partnerships are critical. Partnerships will indeed be the focus of our presentations today. More specifically, all of our speakers will highlight an initiative that involves a partnership of which the University of Waterloo is a participant. And each speaker will introduce their particular initiative, and they'll also reflect upon the role of partnerships in their efforts to advance the SDGs. Next, please. We'll have 4 speakers, each presenting for approximately 10 minutes. And after all 4 have presented, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Please feel free to use the Q&A tab on your Zoom screen, and I'll endeavor to work with my colleagues to get to as many of your questions as possible. And we're excited to see the issues that you'll be raising. Now, with that context set, I'm delighted to turn to our first speaker. So the next, please. And Tania Matto is Director of Greenhouse at St. Paul's University College. Tania has more than 15 years experience working with both social purpose businesses and nonprofits. She's also an experienced social entrepreneur, having started and operated a national not-for-profit, My Sustainable Canada, since 2007. And at Greenhouse, Tania is responsible for designing and executing programming that helps advance the implementation of the University of Waterloo strategy on entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. And Tania, welcome, and it's over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Ian, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I thought I'd sit in front of a typical Canadian winter scene here. We still have snow here in the area, so it's a pleasure to be with you today. So today I'm going to be speaking about a community, specifically about empowering young people to take action and taking action on environmental and social issues. So right away, direct connection to the Sustainable Development Goals. So everything we do is actually to empower young people to bring forward innovations that will tackle some of these pressing problems. Today in my presentation, I'm going to be highlighting how partners are critical to supporting youth-led innovation. Next slide, please. Now, of course, we've all gone digital in the last year and all of our programming is virtual, but I wanted to just kind of give you a sense of where we're physically located. We're hosted within St. Paul's University College, which is a post-secondary institution affiliated with the University of Waterloo, established in 1962, with its mission to research and teach knowledge, skills, and values that address complex local and global development issues. Next slide, please. And this is a space that I'm missing a lot. This is our innovation space in which our students work out of. To give you a sense of who we serve, it's primarily an undergraduate audience, but it also includes graduate students. And we serve students across all 6 faculties at the University of Waterloo. And to give you a sense of sort of where they're coming from, these are students that are environmentally conscious, social justice minded, tech and entrepreneurial savvy, and of course have that strong desire to want to make a difference in the world. Next slide, please. So our programs, so we've been around since 2013, and since that time we've supported 22 cohorts of young social innovators and entrepreneurs. In 2018, we started to expand our programming to look at how we might enable innovations through partnerships through workplaces, and hence launched the Workplace Innovation Program. And this is where we train students with an innovation management framework to then deploy teams to identify opportunities and design impactful solutions within a host organization. Since that launch, we've partnered with 15 host organizations that have both a local, national, and in some instances, international presence. In 2021, this year, we expanded our programming even further to include and create pathways to support Indigenous students. And in this year, we have a goal of supporting 60 Indigenous youth across the country. So we're collaborating both with our colleagues at St. Paul's University College that run the Waterloo Indigenous Student Center, but also collaborating with post-secondary institutions from across the country to start to take the content that we have and indigenize and work in partnership with local communities across the country. The impact that we have in our programs can be distilled down into 3 ways. Experience, we're trying to support students in actually moving forward in milestones from those early stage ideas to developing some sort of venture that has an impact. Skills, development, understanding, and reflection of these skills in that entrepreneurial mindset. And then of course the knowledge, so taking the academic learnings that they have and applying them. Next slide, please. So what inspires a greenhouse innovator to take action? Is it nurture or nature? And in some cases it's both, and I wanted to give you a flavor of this. So some of the students that we attract have that fire in the belly. They've had some sort of life experience that has really put that fire in their belly that they want to take action and make a difference in the world. Here's 3 examples here below. Emory on the far left is a company which one of its founders actually lived within a situation of Iraqi refugee camps and noticed a gap in health information being recorded and used in order to better improve the health and well-being of those folks in refugee camps. In the middle there's Be Blended and Eileen, and she's had a direct lived experience, of course, with the gaps that Black women face when trying to find a hair care service. They can't just walk into any hair salon and get their needs met. So she created a company called Be Blended. And then Richard Yim on the far right launched a company called D-Mine Robotics, basically inspired by the fact that throughout his childhood living in Cambodia, that fear of stepping on a landmine and in fact having a direct lived experience with losing a family member, started this company, Robotic Technology to Remove Landmines. So that's one aspect of what inspires a greenhouse innovator. Next slide, please. The other realm, and this is something that we asked ourselves, and a lot has to do with partnerships, is can we actually create platforms for students that maybe don't have that direct lived experience yet, but want to make a meaningful difference in the world. And this, of course, is focused on our Workplace Innovation Program, where we partner with different organizations and ask those bigger picture questions like, how might we enable consumers to make more sustainable choices in the marketplace? How might we address isolation in our rural communities? How might we support children that are living with disabilities to better communicate when they don't have that verbal component to communicate with? So these are other areas where we curate events and actual placements in which we can create those experiences for students and empower them to take action. Next slide, please. So to give you a sense, we're also, in terms of like incubators, we kind of cross across a few different segments in terms of supporting youth-led innovation. So it's not just startups, although startups is certainly one component. So when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and a lot of it is driven by social innovation, we find that the initiatives that come out of our space cut across these three categories. So campaigns and mobilizing community, policy change can often be a great way to enable change. And then of course, supporting students that have new ideas for products and services and could then propel them forward into starting a business. Next slide, please. So ultimately, it takes a community to build ideas. And I wanted to kind of take the rest of the time to kind of outline that. Next slide, please. So when supporting these young innovators, these are some of the challenges that they face, and some of the challenges that we seek to address through our partnerships to better support them. So for many of our young people, obviously getting that access to on-the-ground knowledge and inputs is critically important. It validates their problem, but it also helps support and validate solutions. These systems, of course, are complicated and complex. And how do you know where in the system to actually intervene and take action? And then, of course, navigating these fragmented networks. When we're trying to move forward with initiatives that push forward on social change, they often cut across many different networks and sectors of our society. And then, of course, when we do have ideas, how do we get them out there and experiment and validate those solutions? Next slide, please. So this is sort of where we've taken partnership approach to addressing some of these challenges. So with on-the-ground access, it's a range of things from events to more formalized partnerships with host organizations. So to give you a sense, discovery labs are something where we curate a variety of stakeholders in a space to share stories, to reveal pressing problems and challenges in which the students can directly engage with and get a sense of where there might be opportunities to make a meaningful impact. And then through our workplace innovation program, we have a formalized partnership with host organizations in which they dedicate innovation brokers, if you will, to support these teams on getting them the right information so that they can further validate the problem that they're trying to solve and further validate and test their solutions. So this is critically important to kind of moving forward in that first stage of the innovation process. Next slide, please. Partnering within and creating an ecosystem and plugging into that is also crucially important. One of the challenges that we find, and perhaps other colleagues who've joined us on the webinar today, is that students, through no fault of their own, will collaborate within their own peer network and discipline. And so how can we, as a innovation hub, if you will, create those opportunities where they could get connected with other individuals, whether it be other students across disciplines or other experts, advisors, researchers, etc. And then, of course, facilitating that open innovation mindset that it really takes a community of people to build these ideas out as well. Next slide, please. Navigating fragmented networks. This continues to be something that we're always looking to strive towards. So whether it's looking at your own campus and saying, how do we cut across silos, and how do we better partner and connect all these various networks and know who the right people are to go to best support our students. And then also, can we create these more formal research and innovation partnerships with organizations as well? So that's some real intentionality behind leveraging youth-led innovation for change. Next slide, please. And then the last one is this accessing funding for experimentation. And here I call upon thinking about funding in a real broad sense. So sometimes it even just ultimately means partnering with organizations to create those friendly sandboxes, if you will, for experimentation. So whenever we can, at St. Paul's, we end up being a sandbox for some of these early stage ideas where students can kind of get out and test their products and services, if you will. But we also look at that other partners who are willing to play in this space and say, yeah, we want to advance new ideas, and we're willing to use our organization as a sandbox for experimentation. And then, of course, there's your traditional navigating those funding opportunities and grants and whatnot to help support students in that early stage prototyping. And then as they further get down the field with launching something that's more about product market fit. Next slide, please. So I'll leave you with sort of this broad call to action, because I'm certainly interested in getting connected and partnering with anyone who might be interested. And of course, with events such as this, you kind of put it out there and you see who comes forward. But we are interested in always looking at different partnership opportunities to support and scale our youth-led innovation. So if this is something that resonates with you, please reach out and connect. And then my final slide here is just a bit of my contact information. So do reach out. Of course, we're on the various socials as well, but email is probably the best way to get in touch with me. And thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to Ian.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tania, for that. That was wonderful. And could I have the next slide, please? Now it gives me pleasure to introduce Paul Parker. Paul is professor in the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo. He's also co-founder and director of Reep Green Solutions. Paul's research focuses on building sustainable communities by creating win-win opportunities for the environment and the economy. More specifically, his interests include sustainable energy policy, sustainable community development and the green economy, residential housing retrofits, and low carbon futures. Can I have the next slide, please? And Paul, welcome, and it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Ian. And of course, greetings to everyone, regardless of the community or continent that you are located in. I'd like to briefly share some of our experience with the Reep Green Solutions and Green Communities Canada, and talk about the great value that combining research and partnerships has to actually achieve impact, because that's what we want for the SDGs. Next, please. Ian has kindly given a land acknowledgement. I would like to add one more component to that, and note that this is also the territory that is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. This is represented in the top left, and this is an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region where we live. And to me, that also represents the core of our Sustainable Development Goals. Today, I'll briefly introduce the partnerships, reflect on some of the achievements, and leave you with a few final thoughts. Next. So it starts with context. Of course, everybody knows the United Nations Framework for Climate Change. The convention was signed in 1992. We were going to stabilize the atmosphere, so we stopped these impacts. 5 years later, 97, we knew we were going still in the wrong direction. The Kyoto Protocol set reduction targets. Let's set targets to reduce our emissions. So the Canadian government signed in. 98, they brought forward the Canadian Climate Action Plan. But what are you going to do? I always love the story of bragging about our students. So one of my former students, UW alumni, Dan Scott, was working for Environment Canada. He agreed, let's take some action. So he came back to his alma mater and said we should do something. And so we worked with Dan and community partners, and Environment Canada ended up being a funder with the local municipalities and local utilities. And I'll tell you the story next. So Reep Green Solutions was formed with a mission to empower the community with the practical tools, knowledge, and capacity for action to make sustainable living the norm. So we have a vision that we believe by acting today, we can leave our children a community that is more resilient, vibrant, caring, and sustainable. What does that mean in practice? Next. The range of projects started with home energy efficiency by insulating our homes, by using less energy. There'll be less emissions that are associated. It includes a carbon footprint calculator, project neutral. It includes the region's climate action plan with our partners, Sustainable Waterloo region. It includes stormwater management and advice on water conservation. In fact, if I ask the test question, what is the most popular video on the Reep YouTube channel? The answer would be a soak pit. What's a soak pit? It's how you put a structure in your garden to absorb more water so it doesn't run off into the urban wastewater. Next, we have the urban forestry project. And then you want one that really empowers people, de-pave paradise, rip up the pavement and replace it with a community garden. And finally, zero waste challenge. So a broad range of programs now. Next, please. A little bit of the history. So the project began in 1999 as a university research project, with the university having core founders, including Ian Rowlands, our chair for today. The Elora Center for Environmental Excellence was a very important partner. They also were part of the Green Communities Canada network, which had a contract with the federal government, so the software we could use. And then that was very successful. We've had over 100 students participating in the program over time. And by 2005, we became incorporated as a not-for-profit corporation and became a formal member of Green Communities Canada. By 2010, we had a demonstration house where we took a century home that retrofitted it to demonstrate how we can take old houses and give them new performance. Next, please. Of course, we had academic outputs. We wrote articles, and so we had a special issue of Environments based on the first 1,000 evaluations. We've each written in our various disciplinary journals. We've participated internationally, like through the International Energy Agency, to disseminate the ideas. So productive from the academic side. Next. And of course, partnerships pervade everything that Reep does. We have core funders, we have funders for the individual programs, whether it's urban forest, stormwater management, etc. Next slide, please. So partnerships is the idea that we each are stronger by having more resources together. Here you see the partners for the climate action, for the energy home evaluations, for the deep paving projects. Next, please. What are the impacts that have been achieved? So reflecting, we can just go down the list of SDGs. You want to talk about clean energy. So we've had both the initial residential energy evaluation and then the measured reduction and calculated the associated impact. So you're talking about 27,000 tons every year, year after year, as a result of these home visits. That also stimulates the local economy, about 54 million spent on local renovation projects. We've helped with the stormwater management with nearly 100,000 liters of storage capacity added, 9,000 participants in workshops. We've looked at improving our infrastructure with volunteers for de-paving paradise. This is often school car parks and so on. We have the urban forestry project. We have the zero waste project. We have climate action. So hundreds of people, thousands in total, and now a goal of having 10,000 significant actions. Next, please. So that's a story of success. We're being very happy with our partnerships. However, I thought the better lesson for today is, what about the not so happy times? What happens when you hit a crisis? So I'd like to share with you the crises that we have met along the way. Yes, we started as a result of a government program. We were using a government software package for evaluating residential energy efficiencies. And in 2003, we had a federal election that changed the government. So in 2004, I had what was my hardest day ever at work. And I remember it very clearly. It was 4:20 in the afternoon of a Thursday when I got the email that said, as of Friday, the government was going to close their program. And I was the chair of the board, and I felt I've got 7 employees whose livelihood depends on what we're doing, and we're out of work tomorrow. What do we do next? So it was a real crisis for our organization. The solution came from our partners. Of course, different partners have different ideas. One private partner called up and said, Paul, you've got excellent staff. I'll hire them all. And so that way they have ongoing livelihoods. And I think, wow, that would be great for the individual, but it means we no longer have an organization. So I'll just pause on that one. Another partner, the local utility, says the federal government might be cutting your funding, but we will continue to support it for our residents. And so that breathed a real sigh of relief. So within a week, we were able to arrange things so we could say, yes, there's been a national cancellation of the program, but locally we are still going. And bigger even impact is not just the local success, but then our local mayors passed resolutions at council to bring the program back. They took that to the national body, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. That national body took it to the national government. And indeed, the program was brought back, of course, with a new name to represent the new government, but essentially the same program. And it was able to grow and thrive across the entire country because of the strength of our local partners. They gave us strength. And so 4 years later, when the government canceled the program again, it was much easier. We had 22 staff, but we were diversified our activities. And so we were much more resilient. But I just wanted to say it was the partners that gave us the strength to adapt and indeed to thrive under challenging conditions, so that now 20 years later, we are still thriving. Next, please. I'll be happy to answer any questions in the Q&A and encourage you to work with your partners to solve these substantial sustainability challenges. Thank you.
Paul, thank you very much for that. Wonderful stuff. And could I have the next slide, please? Gives me pleasure to introduce now Nidhu Jagoda, who's a Masters of Climate Change candidate at the University of Waterloo. Her professional and research interests lie in climate change advocacy, science literacy, sustainable development policy frameworks, and climate change diplomacy and partnership development. Nidhu currently works as the network coordinator for the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Canada Youth Chapter, a global network that mobilizes scientific expertise and community action towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Could I have the next slide, please? And Nidhu, welcome, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Ian, for that warm welcome. And hello, everyone. I am honored to be here today. As mentioned, my name is Nidhu, and I am the National Network Coordinator at SDSN Youth Canada, and I'll be talking to you about our approach to partnership building, or SDG 17. Can I have the next slide, please? So SDSN Youth Canada is a regional network of SDSN Youth, which is an initiative of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. SDSN is a global movement to build networks of universities, research centers, civil society organizations, and knowledge institutions, all to facilitate learning and accelerate the problem solving for sustainable development. The Canadian Youth Network was launched in May 2018 and is hosted at the University of Waterloo. It works nationally to mobilize youth on campuses across Canada to learn, engage, and act on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs. Can I have the next slide, please? So with over 1,300 participating institutions worldwide across more than 40 regions, SDSN members work together to support action-oriented research and address some of the world's most pressing problems. Next slide, please. So the SDGs provide a very overall blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all, and to ensure that no one is left behind. They address a multitude of global challenges, including poverty, hunger, and climate change. Progress is being made in many areas, but overall action to meet the goals is still lacking in speed and scale. So no country is really on track to meeting the goals by 2030. And 2020, if anything, ushered in this decade of ambitious action to deliver on the goals. Next slide, please. So the COVID-19 pandemic, as we all know, has brought with it historic disruptions around the world. It has caused a deep global recession, extreme poverty, food insecurity, job loss, It has laid bare many of the inequities of our current socioeconomic system. And this is a significant setback for the world's ambition to achieve the SDGs. Next slide, please. So what is Canada's current progress on the SDGs with all of this in mind? Next slide. So Canada ranks 21st in the world in terms of progress on achieving the SDGs. It has an overall score of 78.2. Sweden ranked #1, with Scandinavian countries dominating all top 6 spots. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows a look at our SDG dashboard. In Canada, it is measured by 60 indicators. The current assessment was that in 2020, we scored really, really well in certain areas like SDG 4 or education, but there are quite a few areas that we need to improve on. Next slide, please. This slide just shows a more comprehensive look at those areas on which we're moving backwards or need significant breakthroughs. In the cited study on this slide, it was found that breakthroughs were needed on more than 60% of indicators available in Canada. So we need to talk about disrupting business as usual, because the approach we've been taking is clearly not solving our problems. And so it's important to remember that no single institution or government can take on this work alone. There needs to be a shift towards creating more alignment and cooperation between the different sectors of society, with each segment having an important role to play. And in that respect, civil society is leading the way in Canada. Next slide, please. So SDSN Youth Canada, as a network, has the mission to empower youth to create sustainable solutions. Our initiatives follow a 3-step theory of change to educate, engage, and mobilize local action on the SDGs. Our network oversees and coordinates the activities of 13 SDG hubs across Canada, and a number that is rapidly growing to our excitement. We are partnered with 44 member institutions in Canada, and with about 30 of them being post-secondary institutions. As a result of our multi-tiered structure, we have multiple approaches to partnership building. After all, a network is only as strong as the connection points between its members. And so in the next few slides, I'll be talking about leadership development, creating partnerships on campuses and with campus administration, as well as national scale collaboration opportunities. Next slide, please. So my first tier of engagement would be with the Canadian SDG coordinators pictured here. So this lovely cohort of coordinators functions as the liaisons between the broader SDSN Youth Network and Canada networks back to their respective hubs. So they are in charge of localizing action, engagement, and education on the SDGs at their campuses. In my role as network coordinator, I provide network vision and lead intra-network cross-hub engagement. My goal is to ensure that I facilitate avenues of communication and collaboration, and that I enable resource sharing, as well as support in student leadership development. So our methodology for capacity and skills building is quite simple. We hold weekly one-on-one sessions with the coordinators for more personalized and tailored strategic guidance. There's monthly open calls that we host at the beginning of each month, and that's really used as a platform for sharing experiences and knowledge between coordinators, training modules, and updates about the network. Additionally, the Global Youth Team also holds monthly development workshops for the coordinators, as well as extensive mentorship programs where they connect new SDG coordinators to more experienced ones across the world. We have multiple established avenues of communication. And this includes groups such as Workplace, where they connect to the global network, Slack groups for more Canada-specific collaboration between hubs, a WhatsApp group for more immediate and casual contact points, and a Google Drive, which is the primary file holder for SDSN Canada. Next slide, please. So partnerships with campus groups, campus administration, and local organizations are key drivers in building a resilient hub. Our coordinators gain a better understanding of their landscape by performing environmental scans. They then create a plan accordingly to build an inclusive and enabling network on their campus. So to accelerate the process of mainstreaming the SDGs in university settings, student hubs engage with campus administration regularly to formalize partnerships and leverage logistical, administrative, and/or financial support. For instance, a key partner for most of our hubs have been sustainability offices. Our hubs also develop a community profile by working and collaborating with local organizations on events and projects. Partnerships with these stakeholders, or these key stakeholders, I should say, have enabled higher impact SDG related actions and projects on campuses and in the community. These include awareness raising, the creation of interdisciplinary units, integration of SDG content into existing curriculum, and/or the development of new curriculums, and as well as co-curricular activities. Next slide, please. So to transform their student membership to a community of change makers, the coordinators offer a variety of engagement opportunities. And these include developing an executive team to enable leadership development and hub growth, forming an SDG alliances with student groups to amplify current collaboration and youth initiatives on campus, as well as to create a space for resource and tool sharing between clubs, services, and students, running the SDG certificate program, which is an SDSN youth certification initiative that educates members and empowers them to become engaged with the SDGs. And finally, they host monthly education, network, and solutions events towards knowledge and capacity building. Next slide, please. And so this brings us to the third tier of engagement, which is national collaboration piece. So the question is, nationally, how do we create cross-national partnerships between campuses? And on that level, we want to make sure that our coordinators have the opportunity to collaborate not only with themselves, but with external organizations working in the same space. And that is really what is at the core of our national initiatives. So it's about convening and supporting conversations. And so this slide kind of features the logo of our yearly national conference, Together Ensemble. This conference is devoted to tracking Canada's progress on the SDGs and addressing our development challenges. It represents kind of an all of society approach. It brings together the private sector, academia, and civil society, as well as the government. Our second major national initiative, which is still in the very early stages of planning, is the Climate Action National Youth Mobilization and Awareness Campaign. And so this campaign aims to mobilize youth political advocacy towards a climate emergency declaration in provinces across Canada. And at our current stage, we're working on partnership building with external stakeholders to leverage collaboration opportunities, capacity building, and resource sharing. We're trying to effectively mobilize networks of youth across Canada, which is our most ambitious initiative yet. And next slide, please. So as a final note, if you're interested in our work at SDSN Youth Canada, would like to support some of it, or even leverage partnership opportunities, don't hesitate to connect with us. We're always looking forward to connecting with our community. Thank you, and Ian, I'll hand it back to you.
Nidhu, thank you very much. That was wonderful. And could I have the next slide, please? And fourth and final presentation is from me. And as I mentioned at the outset, Ian Rowlands, AVP International at the University of Waterloo. My faculty position at Waterloo is as a professor in the School of Environment, Resources, and Sustainability. And my academic activities are in the areas of international planning, energy management challenges and opportunities, sustainability issues, and international education. Can I have the next slide, please? And I'm delighted to complement my colleagues' perspectives with a few words about a university's international partnerships. Universities, of course, have multiple connections with the world, and these come from various parts of virtually any university. They come from individual members, from individual units, or from the university as a whole. And as these different entities reach out across the world in many different ways, there will be different levels of intensity and different degrees of formality as well. Let me spend a couple of minutes just giving a brief overview of some of the University of Waterloo's international partnerships, before I conclude by identifying what I take to be a couple of the most salient issues for thinking about the ways in which universities can engage in international partnerships to advance the SDGs. After that, we'll open it up to discussion and questions. So I continue to encourage you, please put questions in the Q&A function should you wish. At its most fundamental, there will be individual university members' connections across borders. And to start the conversation, I've got a few bullet points there. In the case of the University of Waterloo, we can think about our more than 8,000 international students who bring with them many diverse international connections. Moreover, we have every year more than 4,500 outbound international student experiences. This is our students going abroad for cooperative education work terms, for exchange terms, for research, and so on. And then you turn to our faculty members. Bibliometric search reveals that there's almost 3,000 publications a year, which involve at least one University of Waterloo researcher and one researcher from an individual outside of Canada. So collectively, these 3 bullet points and many others as well represent quite a portfolio of international connections emanating from individuals at the university. And then turning to units, that is our faculties, departments, schools, centers and institutes, academic support units, we have more than 100 of them. And they'll have their own international connections and activities and aspirations. And to take a deeper dive with you today, I thought I'd bring up stories of 3 of our particular research centers and institutes that have SDGs very much foregrounded in their work. Could I have the next slide, please? Given the increasing scale and complexity of water issues in Canada and around the world, the University of Waterloo established the Water Institute in 2009 to provide an on-campus network of excellence in water research, education, and innovation. And UW, our university, is now ranked amongst the world's top academic water research and education institutes, and our faculty and students are making significant contributions in advancing the sustainable use and management of water. Go to the next slide, please. And on this slide, you've got just a couple of examples of international partnership activities that have advanced the SDGs. First was the Water Institute's interdisciplinary PhD summer school on climate change and water security in urbanized watershed. Hosted on the UWR Waterloo campus, it involved 30 participants from partner institutions representing 5 continents and 15 countries, coming together representing a range of different disciplines to investigate water issues. And the second example is the Water Institute's Water Security and Dhaka, Bangladesh collaboration. Working with the UK-based Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor organization and Bangladeshi university and NGO partners, the co-designed research focused on the relationship among water quality, public health, and the costs of illness. And this research has informed local policymaking, industry, and other stakeholders on potential options to improve the current situation there. Go ahead, next slide, please. The second of my 3 institutes I'm briefly profiling is the Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy, often known as WISE, which focuses on SDG 7, clean, reliable, and affordable energy for all. WISE recognizes that developing scalable solutions to SDG 7 will take innovative partnerships that bring together academic expertise, business acumen, political intelligence, and community understanding. In 2015, WISE, along with our partners in Germany, the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, created AE4H, Affordable Energy for Humanity, which is a consortium that brings together over 150 experts from 34 countries. Members include academic researchers, small energy businesses, civil society groups, indigenous communities, government agencies, and so on. And together, they're looking at ways in which they can develop collaborative research projects to move SDG 7 practices forward. It provides as well work integrated learning opportunities for University of Waterloo students, collaborative projects at the local level, for example, off-grid solar and wind in East Africa, and events such as a biannual innovation laboratory conference. Next slide, please. And a couple of examples to give some more substance to WISE's international partnerships. On the right there, You've got the IEEE special issue on electricity for all, which was edited and written by a number of the Affordable Energy for Humanity members. And on the left there, you have Hitch, a company that was incubated by WISE and other AE4H members that now provides access to education for thousands of Nigerian students using a solar-powered device that provides internet connectivity for e-learning. Go ahead, next slide, please. The third and final of the three is our Interdisciplinary Center on Climate Change, which is the focal point for climate change activities at Waterloo. And it brings together over 100 faculty members, hundreds of graduate and undergraduate students, and affiliated scientists in both government and other institutes in Canada and beyond. And you see its core objectives of the center are to catalyze world-leading research and innovation, to provide experiential interdisciplinary training for students, and to build new capacity and collaborations on campus, in the community across Canada and around the world. Following the IPCC's framework, a lot of the work centers around climate change science, mitigation, adaptation. But what distinguishes the Interdisciplinary Center on Climate Change is the way in which it truly brings together in an interdisciplinary manner natural science, engineering, sustainability, socioeconomic, and governance perspectives. Go to the next slide, please. And again, many international activities going on, but one that was just highlighted here is a partnership with an international development agency, the Mennonite Economic Development Associates, or MEDA, that operates in the Global South to support economic development through agricultural focused programming. The partnership enables direct exchange of knowledge and networks that amplify the impact of the center's research on the ground, and it provides, again, excellent opportunities for students to engage and to learn. There are contact details for each of the water, energy, and climate units at UW that were presented on the slides, and I encourage anyone interested in learning more to follow up accordingly. Could I have the next slide, please? And I'd like to just conclude by offering a couple of comments about the institutional level international partnerships in which universities participate. I've got two examples here from the University of Waterloo. One, that like many universities, we have agreements with other universities around the world to facilitate student exchange, to facilitate research cooperation, to facilitate joint academic degrees, and so on. And a lot of these have a mission to advance learning, understanding, innovation, discovery, and promote the SDGs. And the second bullet I have there is a quote from our new strategic plan that we're working on advancing right now. The strategic plan is entitled Connecting Imagination with Impact. And one of the priorities is to prioritize Waterloo's international partnerships to maximize impact for the global good. Obviously, speaking very closely to the SDGs. And if I could have the next slide, I'll conclude by just saying, as I work with colleagues at the University of Waterloo and others around the world in international partnerships and beyond, as we think about how universities can be engaged in international partnerships for impact to advance the global good, to advance the SDGs, I find that these are some of the issues that are coming to my mind. And in the interest of time, I'll just briefly identify them here. Welcome opportunities for elaborating during the Q&A period or offline as well. Balancing, I've written bottom-up and top-steered international partnerships for a university. A lot of the creativity, a lot of the innovation at university comes from the members, the 45,000 individuals I was talking about at the University of Waterloo. Given their academic freedom, their ability to investigate through curiosity, through applied problems that they are prioritizing, we get a lot of very innovative approaches to addressing the SDGs. At the same time, there can be a role at the university level to bring coordination amongst different areas within the university to make 1 + 1 = 3 and to provide connections with the outside world. How do you strike that balance? Is it even a balance that has to be struck? We're talking about things like seed funding for initiatives at a university, providing infrastructure to enable and empower our members to do things creatively and impactful. Second bullet I have there is equitable partnerships. And here thinking about ensuring there's mutual respect, inclusiveness, and a fair and broad distribution of benefits, among other attributes in international engagements we have. And many of you on this webinar will recognize that traditionally some parts of international education have been seen as elitist. There's been high financial barriers to entry, and that's meant that only a very few can participate. How can we bring equity into play in a much more concerted way? I've written there universities' role in multiplayer international partnerships. A few of my colleagues have already touched upon the ways in which they're reaching out nationally and internationally and engaging non-university partners in what they do. I think this is an area that's worthy of continued attention because it does have impact. Measuring the impact of partnerships, I've written there. Universities are having discussions internally about how they measure success of their members individually, success of their units, and success for the university as a whole. Traditionally in academia, it's been about publication in a peer-reviewed international journal. It's broadening beyond that. How, as we are interested in advancing the SDGs, how can we think about measures for success and feeding that into the work of the university? And the last bullet I put there is executing post-pandemic hybrid approaches. I may pick this up in the Q&A session with my colleagues, but the future will be hybrid, I would argue. We're going to bring back those things that we are missing in a university setting very much so, but we're also going to take forward some of those things that we've learned and innovated. How can that help to facilitate and advance international and all kinds of partnerships? So happy to engage on those issues, others who are reflecting and actioning those ideas as well. And at the same time, if I could have the next slide, please. I will sum up by just saying that my colleagues and I have looked at the ways in which universities can work to advance the SDGs through partnerships at different levels, local, national, and international. And I'm delighted that we have some time now, about half an hour, to engage in discussion with you on the webinar. So I'd ask kindly my colleagues to turn on their cameras and join me in a panel discussion and Q&A here. And we'll just get everyone gathered. And I'd like to start by just thanking all my colleagues for such wonderful presentations. And a question I'll kick off on, and maybe I'll go in the order that presented just to start us off. So Tania, maybe I'll start with you in a second. In this lockdown world, I said we're moving to a hybrid world, and we will get there. But at this point, I'm wondering, what have your learnings been about building relationships in this virtual world? Many of us think about the importance of trust, communication, other factors as well. Have there been things that you found particularly challenging, kinds of relationship building? Have there been surprises for you? And Tania, after any thoughts, I'll turn to other colleagues as well. Tania.
Yeah, great question. I was thinking about this in the chat when you put it forward. I guess I'll look at it first from the students that we support and then branch out from there. So our approach, obviously, with going online with students has been very much, probably the traditional tools that everyone's using, these platforms and others. What we did over the summer was basically take all of our content and modularize it and put it all online. And we made it wide open, accessible for our students, and then took the approach of pick up the tools, the content that you need, depending on where you are with your idea. And what we focused our energy on was more about convening students in smaller groups online to have those conversations, to mentor, to then connect them to the outside world and put a lot of focus on connecting them with partners, on connecting them with the right resources, right? So took a lot of the focus on delivering the content and more focused it on mentorship. Going digital has also opened a lot of opportunities for us. It's really sort of accelerated our plans on engaging and creating pathways for Indigenous students. So, now with this model of doing everything online, it doesn't matter where the student is geographically situated, we're positioned to help and support them. So it's certainly might put us in a position where we can really actually start to get that program off the ground and scale it more rapidly. We're still, of course, in an ideal hybrid version, the biggest thing that we're missing, I think, is just that opportunity where you have everyone in the same room and where ideas can collide. And relationships can form that way that you would never anticipate. And we're having to do a lot of the purposeful trying to see, okay, how can we make these connections for our students, right? So that's been challenging. But we're also in conversations now with colleagues in our the International Development Program here too, on how do we help support e-volunteering, which I think is a great opportunity where students can not only get these experiences, but connect with other peers across the world, right? Which I think opens new opportunities for collaboration as well. So there's some thoughts on where we're at, but definitely looking forward to getting to that hybrid model.
Great, great. Thank you very much for that, Tania. Paul, can I pass it over to you? Any reactions on this?
Sure. Well, I actually think we're just really fortunate that technology has reached this point. So it's not just the text of an email, hi, you don't know me, but I'm interested in what you're doing, to now we can actually engage and see what the person looks like without these video platforms that we have. And so I think that's actually given us a great strength. Of course, developing partners, we do it the way that we always have. It's you know someone who knows someone else, so you make that introduction. And indeed, I just had another one this morning, that this is an introduction from an intermediary to what I hope will be a very positive partnership opportunity. And that, of course, extends internationally as well, because it's equally easy to have our video connection with partners in many other countries. And so I think that we're fortunate to have these tools available to build these partnerships.
Great. Thank you for that, Paul. And Nidhu, over to you. Anything to add?
Yeah, for sure. So there's definitely the good and bad to being all remote and all online. One thing I found particularly with partnership building is the sky's the limit. But we are an international network and we do have partners all across the world. So we're used to kind of working remote already. But I found that with external partnerships and connecting with other organizations across the country, let's say, for initiatives and programs, where before there might have been resistance or concerns about, we're not in the same geographical area, these projects are hard to run online. Now those excuses or those kind of concerns don't seem as relevant. So we've actually had a lot more opportunities to connect with partners who are definitely not in the same time zone and just kind of be like, okay, well, we're trying to run this online campaign. Would you like to join? And there's definitely a lot more reception there. In terms of challenges, one of the hardest things, even at our university hubs, is that maintaining engagement online virtually is definitely a pressure point, I guess. There's areas where you hit fatigue online, Zoom fatigue, we've all heard it. So those are definitely things or challenges to work through and kind of design creative ways of engaging people. Honestly, for this generation that's almost completely online anyways, it creates a whole area of opportunity, I would say, to kind of be creative, think outside the box. What are ways we can do this? How can we run these events? What are other options available to us? So I think this is bringing about a whole new way of collaborating, if anything.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'll just add, and echoing many of the comments, I've been struck by the fact that if I can think about collaborations at 3 levels, those that are well established and have those high amounts of trust and communication, they seem to survive this period relatively well. And at the same time, those new collaborations, explorations, because one's done a scan to see there's a potential interest. I think hearing what my colleagues are saying, everyone's in the same boat. So they seem to have an open attitude to exploring in that way. But as others have suggested, it's that in the middle, which can be challenging. In my world at international education conferences, where after someone has given a talk, you turn to the person beside you and say, that got me thinking about something, and those collisions that are much harder to create in this world. I'm going to pick up, answer one of the questions that came in from Katare, and colleagues, if you want to jump in on any of this, please feel free to. The question was, know more about the university's strategy to build up partnership with other universities, for example, European universities, and based on what pillars would be these partnerships. And thank you very much for that question. And always a work in progress. And I find one of my challenges and opportunities is thinking about those three levels I presented of the individuals at the university, the units, and the university as a whole, to see where there's the best connections, the best value added and impact can be made. But one thought that came to my mind, and I may use it as a lead into questions to my colleagues, is about the importance of synergies or complementarities, similarities in partnerships. And at the university level, to answer the question that was made, as we look in the world for university to university partnerships, and a lot of times we're looking for similarities because we want broad participation across our university. And we recognize that the international will be an element of diversity in the relationship as well. So that's just a quick reaction and still a work in progress. But I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues, and anything about in partnerships, I threw three words out, I think: synergies, complementarities, similarities. Anyone want to come back on anything? Tania, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll use our Indigenous entrepreneurship program as an example. So for folks who aren't aware, the University of Waterloo, we have 40,000 plus students, but we only have like a couple hundred students that identify as Indigenous. And there's, of course, multiple reasons for that and multiple barriers for getting into the University of Waterloo for Indigenous students. So in terms of partnerships and thinking, how might we build out, what we eventually want to do is build out a bachelor's degree in Indigenous entrepreneurship. We need to do that in partnership with other post-secondary institutions, and in particular, those post-secondary institutions that have larger populations of Indigenous students. So this is where, we're looking at, we're in conversations with various institutions in Saskatchewan, for example, that have kind of the, the starting points of like 2-3 year programs, like in the trades and social work and business, where we can actually partner and be kind of that add-on component where they do 2 years at one post-secondary institution. And then they automatically, when they apply and qualify, can do 2 years remotely through UW and get a bachelor's degree in Indigenous entrepreneurship. So I think there's some ways to also not only similar, but add additional value in some of these partnerships, especially when we're looking at groups where there are barriers to getting into post-secondary institutions.
Great, thank you. Paul or Nidhu want to come in? I'll turn to one of the questions that come in through the chat, and Nidhu, this one's for you. Your campus network organizes a monthly workshop. Monthly event seems to be tough for students. How did you decide the topic for each monthly? How do you decide the topic for each monthly workshop? From Nofia Sasaki at AIT Thailand. And Nidhu, over to you.
Well, thank you for that question. Actually, that's a great question. So each of our hubs is very unique, as they're located in very different geographical areas and at different campuses with their own situations. So I don't actually decide on my end. It's actually the coordinators who are on the ground and who have a view of what's happening there. And so they decide with their executive team and their partners, what events, what projects are best to run for that month or that week. Usually they follow guiding themes. So if there's something like World Water Day coming up, a lot of them will facilitate maybe a panelist event or some sort of workshop around World Water Day. They do use kind of like the global context for that, and even stuff happening on a more Canadian context to kind of inform their decisions. But if anything, I just offer support and guidance in that area. So yeah, the events are much more decided by coordinators and their teams. And I hope that answered that question.
That's great. Thank you for that. And let me ask a new question. And Paul, I may go to you first on this one. It builds upon some of the questions that were asked and answered in the Q&A, and it's about scale elements. So some of you have partnerships that are primarily local, but then you may have had national and international activities. Mine was talking about the international, and at the end I'll pitch in on how maybe the local is coming into it. just anything, any reflections you have about how the different scales have interacted to maybe reinforce and support your own particular kind of partnership. Paul, if that wasn't too obtuse a question, a response to it?
No, very easy, and thank you, Ian. And of course, I would like to highlight that national associations can be a huge asset. So in the case of the Reep example, Green Communities Canada was certainly a great asset, where you had different programs or different projects being tried in different communities across Canada. So all of a sudden we could say, oh, if that is working for City Green in Victoria out on the West Coast, now maybe we can try that idea here in our community. So this is the same as Nidhu. So the idea of saying we have many experiments taking place across the country, we share the information through a national association, and indeed that's exactly what you're doing now with the global focus on international partnerships through SDSN, of saying many of us face similar challenges. We might need to tweak it for our particular context, but we can share our learnings.
Great, thank you for that. And Tania or Nidhu, anything you want to come in on? Tania, please go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Like we find, especially through our workplace innovation program, partnering with, local groups that might be a chapter of a national network works really well. So for example, Canadian Mental Health Association, we've done a number of initiatives with them. They have local chapters across the country. A youth-led endeavor that has some success on the policy front can then, once demonstrated locally, can then be distributed across the country, if you will, or modified. So lots of great opportunities there. One of the things that we're still sort of trying to mull over and try and find more opportunities for is we're finding that despite our best efforts, students will tend to stay in their own peer network. And even with a lot of initiatives that are set up to sort of foster innovation, entrepreneurship, global pitch competitions, etc., we're often like, they're designed in such a way that students are on teams pitted against other institutions, right? And there's not necessarily an opportunity for students to collaborate with other students in different institutions globally. And so we're definitely interested in trying to figure out how do we crack that nut a bit, because I think that would be a great opportunity to, again, almost give those pathways at an individual level to scale new ideas, right? If we can get folks to collaborate on teams, like much as you mentioned, Ian, with the publications, for example, like how can we do that on the innovation side?
Great, thank you for that. And Nidhu, would you like to come in, or please?
So I said earlier that a network is only as strong as the connection points between its members, and that very much applies to scaling here. So when we have local level events, a lot of those practices, those approaches, and even those partnerships can kind of be scaled up. Usually it's through grassroots events or our local kind of like facilitations that we meet organizations that then connect us to kind of their larger framework if they have a national chapter or an international chapter. And so that leaves area or room for more participation, collaboration, and kind of network building, if anything. So that scalability component plays a lot into the work we do.
Fantastic, thank you for that. And I'll just offer one, in some ways going in a bit of a different direction from colleagues here. And I recognize on one of my last slides, I had the term localization of international education. And one thing that we're thinking of, and many are thinking of in this hybrid going forward, where for reasons of cost, carbon, inclusiveness, and other reasons, travel will not be necessarily the dominant driver that it was of international education as it was in the past. So thinking about how we might be able to use our international local partners, if I can put it that way, to advance our international partnerships. So business partners, alumni, students who are on exchange for long term in another country, engaging with them as they engage with a partner in that other country as well. So just thinking about how we can create these multiple different links to advance international partnerships for universities and international experiences for students as well, and international experiences for faculty and staff too. And indeed, I'll just turn to one of the questions I see here from Tom Collier. Greetings, Tom. Asks Ian, have you found that there's a need to educate colleagues as to the evolving definition of what makes an impactful or successful university partnership in UW's new international plan? If so, how have you approached this? And others may want to come in on this as well. Certainly a work in progress. And I think if you went to those 45,000 members at the university and said, what's the success of an international partnership? You might get 45,000 different answers in some ways, very much different perspectives as to what is the kind, what are the kinds of impacts we want to value. And it is pervasive around the university because all of these different entities have their own incentive structures that they're responding to. And be it tenure and promotion committees for individual faculty members, be it, and the list can go on. We are trying to, at the university level, strike conversations about going back to the why. Why are we doing international education experiences? Why are we doing international research? Why are we doing these elements of our international portfolio? I think in many ways, the debate had only gotten so far as to we're doing it so we can count achievements. Now we're moving more forward and saying, let's not only talk about outputs, but let's talk about outcomes. And Tom, more work to be done by, I hazard to say, all of us on this, and always happy to continue the conversation, most definitely. I'll put a question to all three of you, and Nidhu, maybe I'll start with you. And just the theme of this panel is about the university connection, and all of you have university connections, but you're also not completely university entities. You are your own entities as well. I guess I'll start with the very glass half full element. Is there an element of your experience that you wake up in the morning and say, I'm really glad we're connected in the university space, we're embedded in the university space, and that makes my job more impactful, more pleasurable, whatever the case may be? And whether I then, after all three of you respond, ask about the half glass empty and what inhibits you, I'll decide whether I get to that. But the positive need to start with you and just sort of what positiveness from having that university connection.
For sure. And I feel that John might also be able to answer this, so I can just quickly jump in. In terms of helping us, there's definitely a lot the university does for us, whether it's leveraging partnership opportunities or resources, funding. In fact, I wouldn't have my job without the university, so thank you. There's definitely a lot of areas where I feel that they help push us forward, even gaining that recognition on the community profile. That's something the university helps us gain. And John, if you would like to jump in and kind of give your input, I know you must have much more to say.
Good, and this would be John Beal, who's manager of SDSN. We'll see if he can.
Hi everybody.
Greetings, John.
Hi Ian, and hi everyone. I'll just go very quickly and just say I think universities and colleges, campuses are very vibrant places. You're training leaders, the leaders of tomorrow using a global lens on the SDGs. I think you have research that's driving solutions. You have businesses that are being incubated. You have campus as a convening space to bring all society together. So I think that being part of a university structure for this kind of work offers a lot and is a very dynamic space to be working in.
Great, thank you. And Paul or Tania, would either of you like to comment? Paul, please go ahead.
Well, of course, I'm biased. I love the university because our greatest asset is our diversity. I mean, so it's not just who do I know, but because there's so many people across campus, it is that 45,000 as a starting point. And so whether it's Jatine promoting the WISE, the Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy, and he says, and I've got 500 people working on energy issues, or whether it's the Water Institute, or whether it's the Climate Center, all of these are broad networks, and that gives us huge linkages across campus through all of their many partnerships. And so it is our huge asset. We are not alone.
Great, wonderful. And Tania, would you like to please go ahead?
Yeah, just echoing everyone else. Like I was thinking, it's access to talent, right? Every day I'm just blown away by just the knowledge, the drive, the desire to push the envelope with our students, right? And then, access to talent and research across campus with our colleagues. And of course, all those folks bring years of experience and relationships and connections as well. So it's definitely a web that you can endlessly navigate to make things happen, which is fantastic.
That's great, wonderful. And maybe let me launch a new question, and anyone can come in if they want. It's a bit of a curiosity of mine, something on my mind. And I'm thinking, as we want to have the SDGs more part of students learning at the University of Waterloo, I'm thinking that the ways in which we can connect classrooms virtually might be an important element of that broader portfolio. So a class perhaps in Strathclyde could share an experience with a class in Waterloo about a particular issue. Similarly, the two of them might share experiences with Stellenbosch partners, Swedish partners, or whatever the case may be, and so on and so forth. I guess I put to the three of you, intercultural education for our students as they prepare for that engagement. Any thoughts about that? And drawing upon, I know a number of you have talked about, Tania, I think in particular, I'm thinking about your presentation, the ways in which trying to bring together those diverse groups can be challenging enough on our campus when it's two different faculties coming together. That often an intercultural experience, so it can be across multiple dimensions. The value or importance of this going forward, and Tania, I'm singling you out first. Anything to add on this one?
It's definitely, I think, a huge untapped opportunity for sure. And if I go back to concrete example in, us going forward with looking at building out more pathways for Indigenous students, I mean, one of the critical pieces to this with engagement is any host organization that we'll be engaging with. Our colleagues at the Waterloo Indigenous Student Center have developed cultural competency training. So like that foundational knowledge to ensure that folks are going in with that, as well as adequately supporting the unique needs of Indigenous students, I think is hugely important. And then more broadly, like I said earlier, with, how do we create opportunities where students can collaborate across institutions, across cultures? I think, we just need to start going down that path. And I think with the fact that we're all online now and doing these sorts of things, it just creates more of these opportunities to do this. We're going to make mistakes, obviously, but I think we need to get started with it for sure.
Great, thank you. And either of the others want to come in on this? And Paul, please go ahead.
Of course, I think that, yes, there's a great opportunity, but I think COVID has also taught us that there are also real challenges when our students are coping with many other things, as well as trying to do engaging in international online classes that are in different hours and so on. So it needs to be managed carefully to recognize where our partners or fellow students are at as well.
Point taken. Thank you for that. And Nidhu, would you like to come in?
I would like to second Tania's initial comment about how there's a lot of missed opportunity there, or there's a lot of opportunity there. Universities currently are in charge of fostering this international community, especially in terms of students who are raised to be citizens of the world. And I know even in my network, I have calls regularly with people across the world in different time zones. It'll be my night, their morning. At the end of the day, I think one of the most important things to remember when you're working with anybody across the world is they're people. So respect for your time, their time, and kind of being able to talk about, if there's any expectations right off the get-go, that kind of helps sets the tone for what type of relationship you can have going forward, and what type of partnership, and what opportunities are there, basically. So yeah, I would just like to say it's a very big opportunity that can be tapped.
Wonderful, thank you. And as we're running out of time, I'll put a last question to the three of you, and Paul, maybe I'll start with you. And it's an open-ended one, just sort of as we've got a couple of questions I apologize we haven't gotten to in the chat, which both point to sort of looking to the future, looking to achieve change. I offer the three of you an open invitation for any comments about the call to action, how people should be following up this discussion here, priorities going forward. I'm basically giving you a blank slate for about 30 seconds or any final thoughts. And Paul, I'll start with you.
My advice to everyone is be brave, reach out. If that person sounds interesting, you've got a shared point of interest, make the connection. We're in this together and we can find the solutions together. Reach out and go.
Wonderful, thank you. And Tania, I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. You miss 100% of the shots you never take. So do reach out to any of us where, whatever we've said has resonated, or you think we have some alignment in terms of who we're serving and our goals. So I look forward to following up with whoever reaches out.
Wonderful. And Nidhu, over to you.
Yes, I would like to echo my colleagues as well. Reach out if you're interested. Honestly, transformative action needs bold people to step up and decide, this is something we want to take on. So definitely there's an opportunity for collaboration. And one final comment I'd like to make as well. In terms of the SDGs, there are many different perspectives, I guess, on how to best pursue them. And there's some comments as well in the chat that we didn't get to, but for those conversations to happen, you need to engage and take part in that conversation. So my biggest piece of advice would be, regardless of your current place in life, what age, what involvements you have, take part in that conversation, because those are very important and needed to kind of advance any agenda we want to have on transforming our society. So thank you.
Fantastic, thank you to you. Thank you to all three of you for wonderful presentations today, active engagement during this Q&A, and fantastic discussions and thoughts being shared. Thank you very much to the audience as well for wonderful questions, for your participation, I saw a number of signals that people will be following up as well with our speakers, and I think that's amazing. Thank you very much to our host, to whom I will pass back in just a moment. Strathclyde is always a joy to work with, and very much welcome the invitation and the opportunity to present today and share some perspectives. We started with a picture of snow in Canada, as I took a photo of a morning walk a week or two ago, and we ended with the words of a Canadian philosopher, Wayne Gretzky, a hockey player, so perhaps very apt. And in between, we had some messages, comments, and explorations, which I hope were helpful for the global audience that is attending here. I know that the four of us and our colleagues really enjoyed the putting it together and being stimulated by responding to these comments today. So again, thank you to our three panelists, to Tania, Paul, and Nidhu, and thank you to everyone in the audience, and thank you to Strathclyde. I'll pass it back to our host now.
Thanks so much, Ian. I think we can all agree that Waterloo's provided us with a really great and inspiring overview of how university partnerships can really make a huge difference, and particularly in trying to attain SDGs and what we have as a really challenging decade of action ahead. I think, as Tania said, one of the key roles of us as universities is to develop and support those future agents of change, and it's great to see Nidhu really talking about those agents of change and enthusiasm, and can see that she is one as well. And I'm sure that it must be a great network if she's helping to coordinate it. Great examples of working with youth, great examples of working with community engagement as well. So we look forward to working with you all further in the future, and hope that you've all been as inspired as I have by the webinar. I think I just want to finish by, again, just saying thanks very much. And let you know not to forget that we have 3 more webinars coming up in the series. This time again, next week, we will have KTH, Royal Institute of Technology from Sweden, coming to talk about their sustainable development journey and future strategies of universities as one of the leading universities in the world in really engaging and embedding sustainable development across all of their different activities. And of course, following on from those, you can register already for the University of Stellenbosch and Peking University in the subsequent weeks. So it just leaves me to say once again, thank you so much for attending today. Thank you so much to University of Waterloo for leading a fantastic webinar, and we hope to see you all again next week.